Okay, welcome everyone to the April edition of the Horror Writers Roundtable on-air hangout. Today we have our special guests, Angel Leigh McCoy and Lynne Jamneck. We are expecting Niels Hobbs and Chris Morey to also join us shortly. The topic today is about crowdfunding, so sourcing through things like IndieGoGo and Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and how those projects got off the ground. And we have a couple of very good editors here with us today who put together anthologies that were funded this way. And hopefully we'll get to talk to a couple other folks as they figure out how to join. So thank you for joining us. I think let's just start out. Angel, why don't you talk about your project and the idea and how you decided to do it as a crowdsource?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. The timing actually on this hangout is really good because in about 3 days I have a Kickstarter going live, and so I've been up to my eyeballs in Kickstarter, and I'm refreshing my memory of all the little things that you have to know to do it right. The project is called Another Dimension Magazine. It's an evolution of WileyWriters.com, which is an e-zine and podcast that I've been doing for about 6 years. And I decided to use Kickstarter because I wanted it to basically either be successful or not. Some of the other crowdfunding places that you can go to don't quite work that way. There's not a success or fail. And I wanted success or fail because I wanted to know if people wanted this. And if they didn't want it, I wanted to give it up and be able to move on to something else. And so I'm using Kickstarter to sort of test the waters and see if people are really interested in getting behind this project, or if I would just be wasting my time with it.
Yeah, I think before we started, you mentioned something about really understanding whether people want the project. This is a good way to see if there's a market.
Yes.
Lynne, talk a little bit about your project and how you decided to do it as Kickstarter? Or, I mean, whatever. By the way, which one was it?
Hi, I'm Lynne. The project that I'm currently working on is called Dreams from the Witch House, Female Voices of Lovecraftian Horror. It's a project that I've wanted to do for a while because I don't know if anyone remembers, but at the beginning of 2014, quite a well-known editor in terms of Lovecraftian fiction made this comment that women simply don't write Lovecraftian horror, which was quite funny and silly at the same time. So there was this, as you can imagine, the internet sort of responded to that, and there was a big kerfuffle, and I decided, well, this is sort of a very opportune time to let people know that there are actually a lot of women out there writing Lovecraftian fiction and doing it really, really well. And I thought the best way of highlighting that was just to get all of these people together, get them in an anthology, and show everyone that they are writing Lovecraftian fiction, but they're doing it maybe a little bit different than what has been established as Lovecraftian horror, sort of the traditional sort of road that people take when they write Lovecraftian fiction. So yeah, we did that on IndieGoGo with Chris Morey and Dark Regions Press, and the response to that was really quite overwhelming, and if anything, it showed that people wanted to read Lovecraftian fiction written by women, and it just sort of underscored how I think there is a bit of a misconception where, first of all, where Lovecraftian fiction is concerned, and the fact that women are writing it.
And yeah, and I think that the table of contents that you have, Lynne, is pretty amazing, actually, as far as the contributors that you got, the level of quality, just from looking at the titles, the diversity of the stories. And I was really pleased to see how much support was really drummed up. That goes back to another thing. Angel, how did you guys campaign? What did you do to get the word out about the the funding and about how people could contribute?
So we haven't started that with Another Dimension yet, but I did another Kickstarter for Deep Cuts, an anthology that was an anthology of short stories that accompanied a review of a short story by a woman. Our goal was to sort of honor women writers and get the word out on women writers, but we didn't want to eliminate men from the mix. So we had stories by men and women, all of whom were sort of at the same time telling you about their favorite woman author. So what we did when we got around to sort of promoting that is I went to a lot of forums. I looked for forums that were specifically focused on horror, and if they had ads, I would put an ad there if they weren't too expensive. Money was, you know, as it always is, money is a thing. So I looked for the audiences that I thought would be interested, and I specifically targeted those. Let's see, what else did I do? I went to Facebook groups. And any Facebook groups that were reading horror, that were specifically women readers, that sort of thing. And if they didn't, you have to look at their rules, because each of these groups will have rules. Some of them would allow you to post an announcement that's sort of a marketing announcement. Some of them won't, and they get mad if you post. So look at their rules before you post, but you can post there and say, hey, I've got this thing going on, come and check it out. Let's see, what else did I do? I put an ad in the HWA the World Horror Convention booklet. I put an ad in that, and I did that again this year for Another Dimension. So that'll be in there. Really, I spent a lot of time just focusing specifically on horror readers who like horror.
Excellent. Niels, I see that you have joined. Welcome.
Hi.
Sorry about technical difficulties. I don't know. Still don't know quite what happened, but anyway.
That's okay. It's a little confusing. None of us are quite used to Google and the way they work. It's a little different.
Well, I've been on Google many times, but for some reason it just wasn't connecting at all tonight.
Great.
Anyway.
Hi, Niels.
So we're all here. Most of us are here now. I think we've got a couple more people that are trying to join. Looks like we'll let them figure it out. Niels, we already did a little bit of intro. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about just introduce your project for us so we have an idea.
Okay. Obviously germane to this topic, we are organizers of a convention here in Providence, Rhode Island, based around the life and works of H.P. Lovecraft and sort of the whole community of weird fiction authors and artists and academics that work with Lovecraft. We're sort of resurrecting. We resurrected 2 years ago a convention that used to happen every other year in the 90s and early 2000s. And then sort of lost steam for some of the reasons that these things happen. And when we decided, a few friends of mine and I decided to do this, we very quickly thought about using Kickstarter as a way to both generate income, but then also generate some publicity as well. And so that's kind of what brings us here.
Excellent. And we went to that last convention in Providence, and it was probably one of the best run conventions we've ever been to, I just want to say, and one of the funnest as well.
Good.
Very successful, very successful. And we're kind of covering, I think one of the things that people are interested in knowing is how do you get the word out? And Angel talked about that a little bit. Niels, what did you do to get the word out? What did you do? Did you launch a major campaign? Did you have a lot of different sources? What did you do?
Specifically getting a word out about the convention in general, or about the Kickstarter?
About the Kickstarter.
Okay, yeah. So honestly, the biggest thing that we did probably for getting the word out was just pushing it on Facebook, on our own Facebook page, and sending it out in an email newsletter that we have. That's really all that we did. I think we'd kind of mentioned it a couple times beforehand, and before we even had launched, we'd really sort of organically, even beyond our efforts, had developed quite a bit of interest in it. So that when the Kickstarter actually went up very quickly, it just sort of snowballed pretty quickly from there. But we were sort of taking a chance. As far as I know, it was really the first time people had really used Kickstarter or crowdfunding for organizing a convention. I think we all kind of were like, well, can you really do that? And we sort of looked into it, and we even emailed Facebook about it. Or, I mean, not Facebook, Kickstarter, and they were like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And then they approved it, and then it all went from there. But getting the word out ahead of time, we really didn't do a whole lot. It just sort of took off on its own once it launched.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It really, I think you had a lot of support.
Right.
Lynn, what did you do to campaign? Did you do much, and how much did Chris Morey do? Chris Morey's supposed to be here, but he's, I don't know if he's joining or if he's having difficulties.
What I did from my end, as I said before, Chris sort of took point on the campaign because he's done it before, so he sort of knew the ins and the outs of the sort of administrative things of running the IndieGoGo. But from my end, basically, I think, like Angel said, the really important thing is to know your audience, the people that you're directing the anthology to. And because I've been involved in sort of Lovecraftian fiction for quite a while and studied Lovecraft at university, I wrote my master's on Lovecraft and Poe. I had a really nice combination of people who loved Lovecraftian fiction for simply the fictional aspect of it, and I also had a lot of people who love Lovecraftianism in terms of its sort of more academic aspects. So both of those sort of groups, once I combined them, I found that just using Facebook mostly, tweeting, searching out for forums that were specifically geared towards sort of cosmic horror, if not necessarily what we sometimes consider more straight horror, because that wasn't, I think, what we're doing with Dreams from the Witch House is more sort of psychologically orientated horror, more the kind of cosmic deal. And I just found that tweeting about it, lots of people retweeted it. It's about getting those tweets and those Facebook posts and the correct forum sort of venues and really narrowing them down and just finding the exact ones you're looking for, because at the end of the day they might not be necessarily as many, but if you find the right ones, you'll find that those people will keep posting, they'll keep retweeting, they'll keep sending out messages about it. And if I think about it, if I compare it to some other people that I know that have run crowdfunding campaigns, I was actually quite concerned at the beginning because I'd known a couple of people who had done this, and the amount of people that they seemed able to contact just seemed phenomenal. And I was thinking to myself, I don't know that many people. How am I going to get all of this out to the right markets? But from the amount of money that we raised, I think it's more important to target the right people than to target a huge group of people and just think that a huge group of people is going to get this out. I think it's a lot more important to target the absolute right people, because they will get it out, even if it's a smaller group of people. And I think that really counted in our favor. Just really knowing your audience, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In social media, I did some consulting in social media, we call that influencing the influencers. And if you can reach the influencers, they'll spread your message for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Niels, you mentioned something about whether or not it was appropriate to do crowdfunding for a convention. And one of the questions that our viewers have is that we have a question about, they want to know if it's appropriate to use crowdsourcing to fund buying book stock to take to a convention, for example. So to buy things or to do that. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Do any of you have any experience with that?
Not me personally, no.
No.
I mean, that's kind of one of those ethical questions I think about crowdsourcing in general. It's like, do you start a Kickstarter to pay the rent? You know, like, I mean, at some point it does sort of become a little bit absurd. I don't know, but to me, I think the bottom line, like the message for us is, if people are willing to support you in that way, then it is okay. You know, I mean, at least for those people. I have problems with it personally, but
yeah, I think that GoFundMe is the type of site that would be appropriate more for that, because they seem to have less restrictions, and when you go to that site, you expect more things. Like, for example, the one where someone wanted funding to make a chicken salad. So,
Right.
exactly.
so I think that things that aren't, you know, kind of normal business projects like this probably end up more on GoFundMe. So that would become my answer.
I saw a guy on Kickstarter the other day who was getting a Kickstarter up because he wanted to go out on more dates, but he couldn't afford it, and people were throwing money at him.
Wow, they actually let him do that?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that passed their rules.
I know.
Yeah. So did any of you run into any problems with the rules or questions about the rules that you had to follow?
I can't really talk about the administrative stuff. Chris will know more about that. But the only sort of problem, and it wasn't really a problem, well, people told me it was going to be a problem, was the fact that Dreams from the Witch House was female focused and would only accept submissions from female authors. And from what I know, I think we got one complaint on Facebook about that, and that was it. So in terms of the actual sort of non-administrative stuff about the anthology, more focus on the anthology itself, that was the only thing I ran into while putting the project together. So I don't really consider that a problem, but if there's one negative aspect, it was that one guy complaining about the fact that he couldn't submit.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe it's more publicity when there's controversy.
Yes.
So we have another question from a viewer here, from A.L. Napier. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Have any of the panelists, either publishers or authors, used crowdsourcing to publish a book? If so, what sites? Also, what incentives did you use to attract contributors? Apologies if this was covered, because she couldn't get online. So that's okay. I think that some people didn't join until a little later, so we can cover this. Whoever wants to take this, Angel or Lynn, go ahead.
I can do mine real quick. So basically, when I self-published the anthologies for Wiley Writers, I did them through Amazon, which is createspace.com, and then I did and I'm going to forget that name again. Hold on. I had to look this up earlier.
Oh, right. Smashwords.
Smashwords, thank you. I have a mental block against the name of this site. Smashwords.com. It was probably so traumatic for me the first time I did it that I blocked it out. So those are the two publishers that I used, Amazon and for Kindle, and also for print and hardcover and softcover, and then Smashwords for ebooks. And let's see, the other question was, what incentives did you use to attract contributors? Well, paying them is always nice. They always appreciate that, but that's not always the most important thing to them. I think the most important thing to a lot of writers is if you basically just help pimp their stories, help pimp their name. I always give profiles on the website and in the book. I try to really make it clear, that I care about the writers. and I'm not just, you know, taking their books, taking their stories, just to make some money. So that's me.
Yeah, and I think that in this context, you could take contributors as meaning authors, or you could take it as meaning people that are contributing to the campaign.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A lot of people use incentives to sweeten the pot as far as different levels of contribution. So did you do any of that?
Other than the rewards, for deep cuts, we did the rewards, but then we also did a few giveaways where we gave away some books. That was about it. The rewards is a whole topic, a whole different topic that we should tackle probably by itself, because the rewards can be really troublesome and entangled, and there's a lot of good things and bad things you can do with those. So do you want me to dive into that?
I think what we should do is maybe give Lynne a chance to talk about that if she knows about that side, because I saw a lot of pretty interesting things that you could choose from when you went to her campaign.
Okay.
Yes.
What we did, we sort of tried to keep it very connected to the theme of the anthology itself, the rewards that we did. Chris offered a lot of really good packages through Dark Regions Press, and because he had done Kickstarters before for DRP, he had a couple of really nice collector's editions of previous titles that he'd done. I know he did World War Cthulhu just before we did this campaign for Witch House, and he had limited editions left from that campaign of books that he offered to people, to backers specifically. Those went really fast because obviously they're not, it's something that's not available to purchase somewhere else. So that went really fast. We also offered a lot of, we sold, I think, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we sold a lot of ebook editions for Dreams of the Witch House when the book eventually comes out. We did weird fiction bundles of books that would be similar to the kind of content of Dreams from the Witch House. We did, what else did we do? Oh, big one that was really popular amongst backers is DRP will be doing a limited edition collector's item of Dreams from the Witch House, which will be signed by all the contributors of the book, and it will be hardcover leather bound. That was offered for what's considered, if you look at it for a once-off, it looks like quite a lot of money, which was $200, but those went so fast. And I think one of the reasons for that is because we have the illustrator that we have attached is Daniel Serra, and I don't know if you guys know his work, but his work just seems to be everywhere these days, and rightly so, because if you go to his website, it's so atmospheric and it's so perfect for what we were trying to do with this anthology. So I think the combination of content and illustrations complementing the content was just really attractive to people, sort of the whole package deal kind of thing. So we did that, and then as we sort of went past our initial goal, which was 17K, we offered t-shirts with a specially printed design on the front. We offered, what else did we do? We offered a brainstorm with editor, with myself and the publisher. We offered crits, people who could send in up to, I think it was up to a 15,000 word crit. And we also did custom illustrations by the author that was available at a special price through the IndieGoGo. So we did all of that, but I think at the end of the day, what was really attractive to people was the fact that we had a certain amount of authors already attached to the project. A couple of big names like Joyce Carol Oates and Caitlin Kiernan Gemma Files, Molly Tanzer, and I think that just sort of made it a little bit easier for us maybe at the start to attract backers because there was already something sort of solid presented. I think that helped a lot. That had a huge influence.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Lynn. It really seemed that you already had to start at something great, and you just, you know, you needed the help to finish it, and everyone wanted to see that finished. Niels, let's talk about the convention versus books and incentives. Now, I am right now, if I stand up, wearing my convention shirt. Yay!
Nice.
So why don't you talk about the incentives that you used?
Right. I mean, they're obviously quite comparable to the same incentives for the book projects. We gave incentives for sort of, you know, different levels of passes and sort of different experiences at the convention. We had 3 different levels of passes, sort of a general pass, and then 2 kind of, I guess, what you call VIP passes normally, that sort of allowed for different sort of levels of in-depth involvement in the convention, sort of behind-the-scenes parties or whatever, and then also sort of little a la carte things that people could do. Like one of the really fun things that we did was organize a picnic with the Willem Pugmire in a graveyard in Providence, this graveyard that Lovecraft would hang out in and do acrostics and things like that. And it's a graveyard that Poe also hung out with while he was courting Sarah Whitman. So it's a really neat historic graveyard, and of course, you know, to put someone like Willem Pugmire in the middle of that, surrounded by, I think we had like a dozen people that could sign up for that, was a really sort of unique special event that's pretty hard to top. And it was just sort of, we were like, you know, we were just sitting around going, all right, what kind of awesome, crazy, weird thing can we come up with for people to do? And I think another one was having St. Joshi lead a personal walking tour for like 6 or 8 people or something like that. And then we also gave a lot of things for people that, you know, couldn't attend, like they, you know, could maybe get sort of the general package of goods that you'd get if you attended the convention, like a program book and a T-shirt, so that people that, you know, couldn't attend could still get some mementos from it and feel like they were a part of it still. And then also, you know, obviously kind of that ubiquitous, you know, all right, here's, you know, give us $5 and we'll you know, thank you as we receive the $5 or something. But and so again, it's sort of the same tiered level of things, and then of course, I don't know, I'm sure we'll sort of maybe talk more about this, but then you get into that vicious cycle of trying to develop, you know, higher level rewards and incentives once you've met your goal, which I think can be kind of a little bit of a nasty, slippery slope, but maybe that's a separate thing to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Before we get to that point, I think I've heard horror stories from people with unsuccessful or marginally successful campaigns where they really, really had to work their butt off all the way up until the last second to reach the goal. Did you guys experience that? Have you ever been part of an unsuccessful campaign? Can you talk about a little bit about the time and the time suck that it seems to have for people?
I haven't. This was the first one I did, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I have to say, I really can't think, apart from the fact that I got very little sleep for a month, I can't really say that it was a negative experience.
Yeah. Deep Cuts, the first Kickstarter that I did, was, I would say, marginally successful. It was successful, but it was, you know, it was like nail biting right up to the last minute, and it basically it's very stressful anyway. The whole process of crowdfunding while you're actually doing it and watching the numbers and figuring things out can be very stressful, but especially when you're going right up to the limit like that and aren't sure if you're going to make it, it can be really stressful. So what we did was a lot of tweeting, a lot of Facebook in the last day, to try to get over the hump. One of the things that I've heard is that if you can make at least halfway by halfway through, then you're probably going to make it. I think that there's statistics out there that show that. We had made halfway at halfway, and so we were pretty confident that we were going to make it until we got to that last day, and we weren't quite there yet. So you just got to sort of bust your hump and get out there and get the word out, spread the word, keep it going right up to the last minute. Add a sense of urgency if you're up to the line like that, because people respond to that. They'll respond to sort of that sense of urgency that, oh my God, okay, we've got 24 hours, people, we got to make this go. And yeah, it's quite an experience.
Yeah, we recently were part of a fundraiser for the the Worldcon that's going to be in Kansas City in 2016, because William F. Nolan was born in Kansas City. He's from there, and he was going to be part of the book that they're putting together to accompany. But they were doing a fundraiser for that book, and it was $1,000 short.
Oh.
2 hours before it was supposed to close.
Oh no.
And so talk about influencing the influencers. I mean, we emailed everyone that we could think of that would be interested in it, and did the whole Twitter or Facebook thing, and they made it. They made it. They barely made it, but they made it. That was pretty awesome. So yeah, that sense of urgency, if you can capitalize on that sense of urgency at the last minute, you can push it over the top.
I was quite surprised in the sort of last couple of hours, I'd say the last maybe 10 hours of the campaign. I thought people were going to be, because I was thinking to myself, God, people must be so sick on Facebook of seeing me post about dreams from the witch house. Here we go again. But I thought like the backing support was going to start fading off. You know, people were going, oh, you've gone way past what you wanted to achieve. They've got the money, they can do it. But I was actually really surprised by how many backers we still got in that last 10 hours, and not a small donations, quite big donations. So that sense of I don't know, and at some point it seems to go even beyond that sense of urgency, and people go, everyone's giving the money, this must be a worthwhile project. I think the further it goes past its set goal, people seem to get this notion of, ooh, there's something here because other people are backing it as well, and backing it far beyond its initial goal. So people keep giving you money. I don't know the psychology behind how it works, but from what I've experienced and what I've seen from other people experience, that seems to happen quite a lot when projects go far beyond their initial goals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that kind of actually goes to why people even get involved with Kickstarters, for the backers and the funders and IndieGoGos and any of those. It clearly isn't so much about supporting a good project as it is about getting good stuff. I think the supporting a good project is secondary, as much as people I think would want to be supportive of a good project. I think it's more that they want to get something really cool. That speaks to obviously what Dreams in the Witch House was offering. Towards the end, we also were trying to push it as well. I think we posted it a couple times on our Facebook page, and that's not something we normally do. We don't really try to commercialize too much, but like it was just such a cool project that I think that's obviously part of it. But I think the big thing is people want to get neat stuff. So if you make a good product, I think people are going to get behind it.
I think the thing is, a lot of times, just like what you just said, is that once, in the beginning, the actual product that's going to come out is smaller, right? But once you start pushing past those goals, it starts getting cooler and cooler and cooler, and yet the amount that you have to put in for it doesn't necessarily go any higher. So, like if you pre-purchase a book, for example, like your book, at a certain cost, and then suddenly it's gone past its goal, and you're adding images and you're adding, a leather-bound option. Well, that wouldn't count here, but you're adding images, you're adding maybe more stories, that sort of thing. Suddenly, that cost for that book is a lot more economical, and you're getting a lot more for it, right? So I think that is a large part of it.
We have some more.
Honey, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
There I am. We have a few more questions coming in. Colleen Douglas would like to say this. Women writing Lovecraftian fiction has always been present in one format or another. My own personal encounter was Andre Norton. The Witch House anthology, to that end, was essential to underlining this and facilitates a unique cause that attracts support. You want to comment on that, Lynn?
Can you repeat just that last bit, because you broke up a little bit?
Sorry, yeah. She talks about Andre Norton, and that women were always present, and that the Witch House anthology is really underlining the fact that we had this going on.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm going to take this back a couple of years. When I was at university and I decided to, I actually had to switch universities to, well, I had to move from Wellington, which is in the South Island of New Zealand, or the bottom of the North Island, to Auckland at the top. I had to move to a different university because I wanted to write my master's on Lovecraft. And the university that I'd done my honors at didn't have a supervisor. They said they didn't have anyone qualified to supervise me. So I had to move up to Auckland where I could do my master's on Lovecraft. And I started to hear all these stories about women having negative experiences writing about Lovecraft. And then I met up with another master's student who had also done her thesis at the same university on Lovecraft just the year before. And I was looking for all these people, and both of us had really good experiences where Lovecraft was concerned. And I started looking for all these women who were having really bad experiences writing about Lovecraft. And I started figuring out that most of this was taking place in the United States from conversations that I'd had with other people. And so the idea about doing a collection of Lovecraftian fiction written by women has been brewing for a while, and then obviously, like I told you before, that comment made by an editor who said that women don't like... I don't even know what that comment was based in, because it just doesn't make any sort of sense to me, because... And the fact that he was also so really well entrenched in the Lovecraftian community was it was really confusing to me, because I'd seen all these women write Lovecraftian fiction. How could he not have seen all these women writing Lovecraftian fiction? And so I got to the point where I thought, maybe there's a division between what people see as blatantly Lovecraftian fiction and maybe more cosmic-orientated fiction. And I have to say that a lot of the stories that I ended up selecting for Dreams from the Witch House, I think there's one story, and it's a really short piece, it's a flash piece, that actually mentions Cthulhu. And all of the other 19 stories, I speak under correction, but I don't think there are any of Lovecraft's gods showing up in any of those stories. But when I read them, they are blatantly Lovecraftian to me. So I think at this point, when people talk about women not writing Lovecraftian fiction, I think there's where the big issue comes in is how people view Lovecraftian fiction. If it doesn't have Cthulhu in it, if it doesn't have an old New England setting, or it somehow harks back very, very blatantly to Lovecraft, people don't seem to call it Lovecraftian. They don't. There seems to be a problem there, moving beyond those boundaries. And what I find in terms of women writing Lovecraftian fiction is they do move beyond those boundaries. And they bring a lot of new stuff into Lovecraftian fiction, which is really making it really dynamic. But there still seems to be a group of readership that doesn't see it as Lovecraftian per se. And I think that was one of the big things that I really wanted to do with Dreams from the Witch House, was to show that you can actually write Lovecraftian fiction in all sorts of different ways. It doesn't have to have Cthulhu or Azathoth or Nyarlathotep or any of those characters. And women seem to do that really well. I don't know why. I guess, I don't know, that's maybe a different discussion altogether.
That's fascinating, Lynn, and pushing the boundaries, I think, is awesome. I think, you know, I could see the challenge in pitching the idea and having it paid for, but crowdsourcing really brings it out that, yeah, people want this. There's a market for it, and it just backs up what you're saying completely. So we've got another question here I'm going to bring up here from Kale Napier again. She's saying, I've seen several authors use sourcing campaigns to finance the publishing of a novel. Do the panelists think that's a successful venture? Or does crowdsourcing work best for publishing houses releasing anthologies or activities such as events? Anyone want to touch that?
I don't.
I can
I don't have any novel experience where Kickstarter is concerned. I've actually just started writing a novel, and I'm not even thinking about getting it published. I'm just thinking about getting it finished. So.
Yeah, I haven't personally done it either, but I know several people who do, and who not only do, but they do whole series of novels via Kickstarter, and seem to have a lot of success at it. You have to have a following. You have to be able to build a following if you don't have one. It's a ton of work. It's definitely not the it's not the kind of thing that you can do sort of as a side project, I don't think. I think most of the people that I know freelance or write novels for a living, like full-time, because you have to be fast with the turnaround. You have to be really on all of your social media, and of course all of the marketing falls to you as well. So it's really a broader undertaking if you're trying to sell your own novels than if you have sort of a publishing house behind you. But having said that, there are people who have established audience for themselves through Kickstarter, and all they do is they post, okay, this is the new novel that I'm going to do, and here's the pre-orders for it. They don't do anything fancy. They don't do, you know, big T-shirts, nothing like that. They just say, okay, buy the book, buy the ebook, blah blah blah, and they get it, and they get it funded, and so it works. It works for some people.
So let's talk about once people buy stuff and you have a successful campaign, what happens afterwards? Can you talk a little bit, you on the spot here, can you talk a little bit about the fulfillment process and getting things out and the time that you spent doing that?
Yeah, oh yes. So let me preface that by saying that from my experience, I came away feeling like a successful Kickstarter is still not a full success when you weigh in all of what goes into A, making it successful to begin with, and then B, the flip side, like you're asking about, the fulfillment. It is not by any means free money. So kind of going back to the previous question, I couldn't imagine an author doing that unless they already had a massive following. The amount of work that would take to go into it to make it successful, unless you're only asking for a few $100s and you're asking it from your friends, it's a massive, massive task to get it through, like Lynn was saying, and like Angela was saying. You know, you're often there just sort of, even when you're not just sort of glued to your computer watching the numbers tick up, or not tick up, that is nothing compared to then what it's like afterwards. And again, it depends on what you're funding. I mean, if you're funding making potato salad or going out on a date, then yeah, it's easy after that. But if you're actually funding a proper project, whether it's publishing an anthology of stories, or putting on a convention, or anything like that, anything where there's multiple aspects to it, your work has only just begun when you've finally funded, and it's not even remotely an easy task, especially if you've gotten sucked into that that sort of vicious cycle of adding on extra rewards as you break through different levels of success, quote unquote success. So for us, it was a project that it was a full-time job for the month of the Kickstarter campaign, and then very much a full-time job after that. That caused a great deal of stress and extra anxiety, especially because we were using a lot of artists and things like that to help come up with cool things. So we had like artists who were doing sculptures or bas reliefs or and some of them were amazingly professional and some of them weren't, and it was a nightmare to have to be hounding them. And at the same time, you're getting hounded by your backers, who rightfully are wondering, all right, when am I going to get what I backed for? So if you look at any of the really big Kickstarters that are out there, or even IndieGoGos or anything like that, all the big ones, we backed a few of them kind of as part of the convention, just because they were ones that we thought. Some of them, most of them, I'd say 3/4 of the half dozen or so that we backed, we haven't seen anything from. And it's been over 2 years, and that's because it's just this massive machinery behind it, and it's not something to be considered lightly. There's honestly, like, I'm embarrassed to say, there's probably one thing that we still haven't gotten out to our backers. We pretty much got most of the stuff. It was even awful. We were giving things out at the convention to people who backed us 8 or 9 months beforehand, and we felt bad about that. Still do. But I know that there's, quote unquote, successful campaigns out there that are still haven't given anything to their backers, and I don't think that's because they're not trying, but it's just such a huge operation to do. But anyway,
I've also heard that some people forgot when they did a campaign to factor in the cost of shipping and labor. Storage and all of those things, and when they got down to the fulfillment, they were like, "Oh, my money is going away because I have to do all this fulfillment."
Oh yes, that's not even. There's one other big thing, and if you go on to Kickstarter right now, I will ask anybody that's listening to this, go on to Kickstarter and see what they say about taxes. One thing they don't tell you at all, maybe they've finally gotten around to it because it's become a real issue, is they do not warn you that, oh, all that free money you got, it's not free by any means whatsoever. We actually are in the process of working with an accountant to try to work out our taxes related to our Kickstarter, which, not surprising. I mean, it's treated as income as if you were a business. So especially the more successful you are, some of those $1 million successful Kickstarters are going to have $500,000 IRS bills coming. That's not factored in when people are commonly setting up a campaign. So yeah, all of that stuff, all of that expense, simply going to the post office 5 or 6 times a week or something like that. All of those things need to be factored in, and that's no longer income at that point. That's all outgo. Anyway, no.
With the Deep Cuts Kickstarter, I ended up having to put out of pocket almost $2,000 because I didn't account for taxes, and I didn't account for the cost of envelopes. Envelopes are so expensive; it's really crazy. And when you're shipping something like a hoodie that's thick and heavy, or you're shipping, say, an art print that has to go in one of those tubes, and you're shipping overseas, all of those things add up so fast that it's crazy. The first Kickstarter I did, I definitely was not the smartest person about. The second one, I'm hopefully being much smarter, and I'm gonna post a link over here in chat. Can people watching see this too?
Yep.
So this.
Yeah, go ahead.
This link basically takes you to the preview of the Kickstarter that I'm releasing on Wednesday. And the reason I'm posting this is because down toward the bottom, I actually did a financial sheet for this one, and it lists out all the things that I expect I'm going to have to pay money for. And so it's a good resource for anybody wanting to do a Kickstarter to look at that and say, okay, taxes, you know, state taxes, federal taxes, you have to hit both. And so I figured almost 26% is going to go into taxes. It's probably not going to be that high, because you can also, you know, use what's the word?
Deductions for expenses.
Deductions, yes. You can also always get that in there too. But it is a lot higher than you would expect. And it'll hit you pretty hard if you're not careful. So, you know, anybody who's interested in doing one, go look at that financial sheet, and that will give you an idea of sort of what hit me when I did deep cuts. And it ended up being pretty expensive.
Yeah. Also, just a little bit of administrative here. Any links that any of you want to share or viewers want to share, this will be posted on YouTube after we're done, which will be in a few minutes here. Once it's on YouTube, we can always comment and add the links. So any links that you guys think would be helpful to people who can put them there.
Thank you.
So we have about 5 minutes left. If there's anything any of you would like to say about your projects or advice that we didn't cover, now is the time. And Lynn, I'll come back to you. You're the last one that has a thought.
Do you want me to start off? Okay. Advice, I think I can only speak from obviously from the point of view of raising funds for an anthology, but I think what's important is it took me about 12 months to get the right publisher for this, a publisher that I felt comfortable with. If you're going to do something like this through a publisher, find the right publisher. Make sure that you're happy with what they're going to offer, because the publisher will have a lot of influence or not once you start your IndieGoGo campaign. Make sure you've got the right publisher. Make sure you know your audience, very important. And if you can, try and have a little something already attached to the project when you launch it. Like with Witch House, we had a couple of authors already involved. That's a big draw. I think if you have those three things in place, you've got a pretty good shot at having a successful campaign. And I think I'll just add forth that make your goal, the amount of money that you want to raise, make it reachable for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Niels, you want to follow up?
Sure. I think the biggest advice I would give is to keep it as simple as you possibly can. Don't get suckered into that, like I've been saying, sort of the vicious cycle of adding on extra additions, which is all just going to take away from any of the funding you're actually going to get from this. I mean, I think, kind of like I was intimating before, when all was said and done, we probably actually made no money off of our Kickstarter whatsoever, which was a bit of a shock to people who thought that we basically had $36,000 to play with. It wasn't even remotely the case, certainly after taxes. It's likely that it probably put us in the red. The one thing that it did do is it's really good, if done well, it's really good for publicity, for getting the word out about your project. And that's absolutely worth something. Mm-hmm. I think you have to think about it that way. You can't think about it as free money. Keep it relatively simple. I think, honestly, that's probably why it is probably good for well thought out book projects or music projects, things that are easily encapsulated. The bigger and larger and more elaborate you get, the more likely it's going to be just a complete nightmare to go through. That's probably my biggest advice.
Mm-hmm.
Angel, last thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything both of them said. Absolutely. Keep it simple. Probably the two pieces of advice that I would give specifically for Kickstarter is, make sure you plan out your finances well in advance. If you can't afford to fund it yourself at all, then make sure you're asking for enough money to actually make the project happen. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a bunch of people who are expecting a product, but you may not have enough money actually in the Kickstarter to make it go. And so you have to fund it or disappoint all those people. The other piece of advice that I would give is basically really think through who you need to help you with the Kickstarter, because when you do a Kickstarter, there's a lot of technical things that you have to do. You have to create a video. You have to actually lay it out in the thing, and if you don't have the skills to do those things, then you're going to need help. It's not the rare individual who can do it, but it's certainly not the kind of thing that the common individual can do themselves. So take a look at Kickstarter. Take a look at other Kickstarters. There's definitely a quality bar that is rising as time goes on. People's videos are getting more savvy. They're putting money into them even. There's companies out there that can help you make your video and that make a living doing that. I personally, made mine myself, and it shows. It's very much a B movie, so to speak. But there's just so much that goes into it, and give up everything else during the month or however long you're doing your Kickstarter, because you're not going to be able to get anything else done.
All right. Well, with that, Angel, maybe we've scared off some folks from jumping in too lightly. Yeah, but you've all given a lot of tips on how to make it successful. So I think that the lesson here is it's doable, but you know what you're getting into before you jump in. And I think this has been a wonderful session. We've already gotten a ton of thank yous from people that have been watching. So congratulations, guys. Thank you for joining. I'm going to wrap this up. And
thank you, Sunny.
Watch live. You're welcome. And we will have this up on YouTube and on the Horror Writers Association site probably within the hour. So thanks, everyone, and good.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.